I'm working with Fimo Effect Glitter Blue, and I'm going to break the first rule of the polymer clay Bible, meaning that you should always condition your polymer clay. And there are two things you should consider when working with polymer clay. Those things are properly conditioning the clay and properly baking the clay, and then you're good to go. But for this idea, I've liked so much the way the clay looked when I broke the piece of Fimo Effect in several parts, and the glitter would show so wonderfully that I decided I would use these pieces without conditioning them, and I would bake them, and then I would include them into resin, so I don't have to worry about their strength and durability. For the following idea, you can play as well with the width of your polymer clay layers. I've used the setting number 4 of my Atlas pastel machine, meaning a thinner setting for the glitter blue, and this is some glitter blue properly conditioned and passed through the setting number 4 of my Atlas pastel machine, while for the bright red I've used a thicker setting. I've used the setting number 2, and then I've just sandwiched the red polymer clay between the two layers of glitter blue, and I'm using the roller to get them to stick to one another properly. And then I'm putting this block of clay aside. I'm going to use some light blue, the same color of red, bright red polymer clay, and I'm just chopping some clay, and I'm chopping the clay like you would do when you want to make a faux gemstone using polymer clay. And I will throw in some white polymer clay decorated with silver metal leaf, and this will so that I will have some silver leaf inclusions into this mixture of polymer clay. And so I'm chopping the clay and putting everything together. And then I will just put everything together into a ball, and then I'm going to flatten it, and also use my roller to roll it flat, so that I will be able to put this clay into the pastel machine through the largest setting, and then I will put it again through the setting number 2. I'm happy with the marbled effect of the clay. And then I will just cut thin slices of polymer clay, and they don't have to be of the same width or the same length. So some are thinner, some are thicker. And then you'll have to decide how you are going to cut, to make the final cut, and you'll see what I mean in a couple of seconds. So I am going to cut perpendicular to these thin stripes of polymer clay. And as you can see, I am applying them onto the clay, but I'm not keeping the same distance between them. And I'm pressing also onto these slices to press them into the clay. And you you might need to use some parchment paper and press them even more. And then I will just cut thin slices of polymer clay, and uh, I will apply some of them facing upwards, and you can see um, these tiny lines like in a sewing line, or some of them I will put them on the side, and you can see the middle red layer, and I like the effect of the red clay in between. And this is an idea that I like very much. And then I could not decide what I'm going to do with that block of clay, so I put it aside and I'll think about how I could use it. And then I decided to use some black, I think they are silicone molds that I have successfully used with epoxy resin, and that turned out to be not a great fit for UV resin. I think they are not, I think the UV rays would not go through, and my pieces did not cure properly. So if there's a lesson to learn here, is that you should consider using light color silicone molds with UV resin especially. And I wanted to tell you that using such black polymer clay molds for UV resin was not a good idea, because I wanted you to avoid making such mistakes, and we all learn from each other. And there was another thing that I should have done differently to have a really nice effect on the back of the pieces. So after baking the clay inside the molds to make sure that they would fit the mold, and then I could add resin and make the piece. So after baking them properly in the oven, I should have taken them off the mold, add a thin layer of resin, and then put them back and pour the amount of resin I would want for the piece. I didn't do that, and I have to tell you that the back of the pieces is not looking very nice. I like these pieces anyway, I don't know, I like them anyway, but as a lesson for the future, and normally when I would include things into resin, I would pour a thin layer of resin and then put the inclusions and then fill up the mold. But sometimes you get carried away with the process, and you forget small details that could influence the quality of the final piece. So as you can see, I'm trimming off the ends of the pieces, and I'm just fitting some striped pieces of polymer clay inside the molds. And I've used raw clay that is just torn off into pieces, and I've also removed a little bit of the excess on the back, because I wanted to make sure that it would fit completely. It would be included perfectly into resin, and I would not have to worry about the durability and strength of polymer clay, because it would be protected by the resin. And so I'm applying this same idea to make these molds in different shapes. And I really liked the way these pieces turned out, and I wanted to use the clay, the glitter blue polymer clay raw, because when I've opened up the package and I wanted to condition the clay, I didn't use a blade to cut the stripes. I just used my hands, and when tearing the clay, I've noticed that the glitter was even more beautiful and more accentuated that when you condition the clay, which I did for the clay included in the stripped decorated um, slices. And for one piece, I decided I would use these um, um, slices. And if you want to use them as such without resin, you will have to consider putting them on a layer of polymer clay. You will need a bag to support these pieces. If not, they might break apart even when they are cured. And I'm using parchment paper to press them onto the base. And I've just mixed the clay into one color, and this is the resulting color. But now if I had to do it again, I think I would use bright red for the back of the piece. And as you can see, you can use cutters, and the direction of cutting or attaching the pieces would give you a different result as well. I wanted to go with straight up vertical stripes, but you could change the direction of the stripes just by cutting slightly to the right or to the left. Or you could, of course, um, um, use your flexible blade and cut a free form shape for your pieces. And then I decided to use a different mold, a transparent one, and the curing of the UV resin went perfectly for the pieces that I put in this mold. And for the pieces that I've baked, that I've cured under the UV lamp in the black mold, I had to cure them again because they did not cure properly the first time. So when working with polymer clay, there are always things you can learn or improve, and I consider such I forgot to mention that I used the flexible blade even for cutting out the stripes of polymer clay, and when using the flexible blade, you might not get lines that have the same width from one end to the other because of the flexibility of the blade. But for this project, I didn't want any I don't know I didn't want to work with a perfect perfect cutout pieces and perfect distances between the decorations and between those lines. And then I decided to use a round cutter and some cutout clay pieces to make a round pendant, and I would leave some space to be able to put resin as well, because I wanted to play with the idea of transparency and clay and make interestingly looking pieces. And I personally like them very much, and I hope you will like them too. And of course, I hope that you will give this idea a try. And then I've just put the pieces inside the molds for 45 minutes in the oven at the temperature recommended by the polymer clay manufacturer, and bake them. And then I should have take them off the molds, add a thin layer of resin, and then put them again inside the molds and fill up the molds with resin. And I like these molds, these silicone molds, because you have that raised area, and this raised area which are especially for making pendants. And they are interesting because when your pieces are done, you'll have a hollow part, a hole, and you will be able to attach your pieces, to attach a bail to your pieces and wear them as pendants, or use them to make earrings or other components. But you don't have to drill your pieces. I'm applying resin, as I said, only on the negative spaces and on those area where I put the not conditioned glitter blue polymer clay. Then you'll just have to put the pieces inside the mold, of course, under the UV lamp for 10 minutes. And these are the resulting pieces, and I like them very much. And I have to tell you that when I used the black mold, I could not see properly if there were bubbles inside the resin. So I had more resin bubbles inside those molds, which again, it's better to use a light color or transparent mold, because you have a better visibility and you will be able to um, take out any air bubbles. And you can also use a heat gun um, from the distance and remove such air bubbles. As always, I hope that you liked this idea, and I hope that you will use this inspiration with your work with polymer clay. Thank you, and stay tuned for more inspiration for your work with polymer clay.